Yeah, I mean, we're here. Hopefully that's worked. And hello, everyone. Look, we're early because look, the time on the thing says 19:59, and there we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Alan, and this is Alex, Will, Dan, Chris, and Keith over the far side over there. We work at Anchore, and we work on a bunch of open source security tools, including these two you see on the screen here, Syft and Grype. And we go through some open source work that we would have to do anyway, but we turn the camera on so you can see what's going on. Right, should we dive straight in? Because there's a lot to do. You'll find everything you need to know about us at anchor.com/open source, which obviously links to our Git repos that are on GitHub, github.com/anchor. And you'll find out more about us on our discourse as well, which is all linked. Do we want to dive in? Has anyone got one they want to pick, or one that's really important, a priority that we need to talk about?
I had one, but let's just feel free to pick something else first. I need to load the context back up for it.
No preference here.
Okay, well, that one looks good. So this is Grype 2738. Let me get the chat open here so I can paste a roo. There you go. Package location is not available in the JSON result. One of the SBOM scanning.
Quite some discussion on this one, and it makes sense to scroll down and look for when someone added this and what they said about it.
I think I added a summary at my very last comment towards the.
Oh, golly. Yeah, I'm not reading all of that. What is it Bender says? I ain't reading that. Summarize it in one word.
Fixed. Okay, so this is a multifaceted issue. One of the things about this issue is that we have we're using SPDX, and SPDX is a lossy data format. So we output some things that we aren't necessarily decoding when we read the same SBOM in. And so like an example of one of those specific things is that we output this source info field, but it's a textual comment that happens to have the path to a file. Now this is for the location of a Syft package. So there are like some different files, but this is specifically, there's a set of paths called locations, which are in a Syft package. Okay. So when we read the SPDX document, we don't decode anything into this locations field because we don't actually have the same info. We only have this comment, which happens to be something we generated, but we don't try to parse out or anything and fill it in, which is, is what it is. However, we are outputting the locations additionally as files and relationships in SPDX, which is a reasonable thing to do. However, we're outputting those with this other type, as you can see in the third or fourth of those blocks, with a comment that says evident by. And so like this is coming directly from the same locations field in the Syft package. Okay, so this is thing number one. We could potentially enhance the SPDX to look for this other relationship type to a package and evident by and say, oh, this is something we know about, and fill in the locations field potentially. But this doesn't actually solve the problem for all SBOMs. This would just be solving a problem for Syft SBOMs. And so the other problem is, let's say that you bring any old SBOM, any old SPDX SBOM into Grype and say, hey, go scan this and give me a set of vulnerability results. Well, today, Grype package, okay, so remember before I said we aren't populating the Syft locations. Grype has a package which also has a locations field. And today it's just taking the Syft locations and copying it over. But for SBOMs that aren't created by Syft and don't have those locations filled out, but do have related paths, it seems like we could enhance Grype to say, oh, I don't have locations here. Let me see if I can find a useful reference and put that into the Grype locations so that when a user gets results, they could potentially see, oh, there are some files here that this is originated from. So that was the gist of this long-winded thing. So just pointing out this kind of a multifaceted thing. And there's a Syft aspect, but also I think really the question is the Grype aspect. Would it make sense to try to like enhance the locations in the Grype package to also include things when we don't have any Syft locations, I guess is the crux of the question.
Why wouldn't we want to do that in Syft? Meaning, so, yeah, we, in our case, we have this evident by in the comment field saying that helps us figure out what the edge kind is. But it would say we don't have that comment field and we don't know what the type is. We could still say, oh, well, I have a relationship to what is in SBX known as a file. And we could say this is a location on the package anyway. So knowing that it's kind of going outside of that Syft nomenclature. So then it all stays like Syft stays in the like I know how to decode SBOMs and get locations on packages, and then Grype kind of naturally pulls that in.
That's definitely a possibility. The one thing that I just want to point out is that we don't really have, this is like one of the classic SPDX relationships don't exactly mean the same thing, that we don't have something to express the same thing. And when I kind of got digging into it, the locations for the package weren't necessarily the same thing as related files. Like often one of those related files meant the same, like could be the same thing. Like in this case, it's this other type, which is, not a great thing for us to look for necessarily, but there are other things that, for example, owned files. Our locations, from my understanding, is basically this is the location where evidence was found that this package came from. But we might have other relationships such as like owned files for an RPM package or something like that. And that has a different meaning. So like that's my one hesitation to say, yes, we should like try to get everything into the Syft data model locations specifically.
Wouldn't we have the same problem in Grype though?
Well, that's the thing. I'm not sure the Grype locations means the same thing that Syft locations means. Right? Syft location means evidence was found here, but Grype locations definitely could mean that, but also could mean you should look at this file, right? So like I might have found evidence and have locations being the APKDB, but the owned file might be a curl binary, right? And so like that wouldn't be in the locations field, and Grype would surface, hey, go look at the APKDB, and which is kind of fine because maybe you can infer like now I need to do APK stuff to figure that out. But like the location of the actual binary of the curl binary, for example, like to me is a useful thing for Grype to surface to somebody, not necessarily just the where the information was found. So like there's like a subtle difference between those couple of things, and I just don't know the right answer here.
Well, with the Grype package location, so everything on a Grype package is inherited from Syft by definition. So there's no difference in semantics. The only place where we started kind of changing the semantics is where we added new stuff. So for everything that's existing, it's essentially the same semantics, and then new things like this is where like in Grype package we have this idea of an upstream package where we in Syft the metadata might say something about the source SPM or an origin package, and we formalize that in Grype. We kind of parse all that out and generalize it and just say, oh, we have upstream packages we found, because that's more useful for that use case. So locations is still means like this is what was found. Like, but like I definitely hear your point in terms of like, well, but what value in Grype's use case is that other than to help with vulnerability searching? I think the only extra thing I'll add is that, well, we use the package as kind of a copy of the artifact by the time we output the match. So when we output matches, we say like, here's the artifact we found, here's the vulnerability it was paired with. And if we're changing like the values, so we subset these today, but if we're like changing values mean different things, that might get confusing if like all of a sudden there's different sets of locations on that. So it might be tempting, but I don't know if it's going to be. I think we might get into some weird edge cases if we start changing the semantics of a field.
So let's say that, locations means exactly the same thing between the two tools, which is certainly a good conclusion to have. Is there some other way that we could surface useful information to users without needing to populate the locations field? Or are you saying that, like, maybe we should just try to populate the locations field and assume any related files are evidence, and that's okay?
Well, I don't know. I think I'm interested in exploring this on the Syft side. So because it sounds like on the Grype side, we would say that any related file, we would just say is on this locations package, which may give correct answers or incorrect answers. And on Syft, it's kind of the same problem, right? Like we may, if we just make that a much more looser definition of when we're decoding relationships to files, just allow more things in. It's just the same problem somewhere else. So I feel it makes me feel like it's a decoder configuration on the Syft. So Grype can say, I want a very loose, set of definitions for what can be related files to a package, and kind of let Syft say, we'll allow those in over on that side because it's dealing with decoding of SBOMs. Because yeah, you're right. Like we don't have a good set of known relationship types to work with. I mean, the evident by was one that we created because there was not one in SPDX that existed for what we wanted to express as it was. And the ones that are used in SPDX are used inconsistently across SBOM tools. So it's like hard to make any real good assumptions there almost at all, which makes me feel like we have a very loose configuration that Syft kind of controls that for on the decoding side.
I think that I absolutely agree. So if I could summarize, I think what we can do is probably have some logic to try to pick the best relationships to use as locations when we don't have incoming location, when like we're decoding SPDX formats. That would happen to fall back probably to the other type eventually. And so like the Syft SBOMs would just naturally work the right way. And then others would sort of also. All right, that sounds good to me. Chris?
It might be, never mind. I thought it was going to be like a little too deep, but I couldn't remember if Grype used the formatters from Syft or not to do the decoding. So if we land it in Syft, does Grype get it for free if we make all of that decoding to the same model, or does Grype have its own pathway that populates that field? That's what I was just trying to look at in the code right now.
It's all free. Yeah, it uses the Syft decoding for everything, with a little bit of extra stuff that it uses itself.
Yeah, I think we don't have to do it on this call, but I would be interested in what the little extra stuff is and seeing if that's stuff that should be lifted into the Syft formatters, or if there's some conflicts there that would affect this at all too. Because I haven't looked at that recently to be familiar enough if we have to like refactor that.
It's Grype specific data. So for example, the distro is really the only thing. Distro and upstream being read off of the Perl. Maybe the upstreams, I can't remember, that might be in the Syft side, but like, for example, the distro now, you can have multiple Perls with different distros and get accurate results across multiple distros, but there's no place to put that in the Syft data model. So the Grype just puts it in its own distro, like per package distro. All right, well, I think we got a conclusion here, which I like the sound of, so I can write up an answer to that one.
If we answer this, can we close this issue too? Because it looks like the user resolved themselves and was just like, I like Cyclone DX anyway. Like the whole TLDR of the issue was, I don't want to use SPDX anymore. I just want to use Cyclone DX, which I encourage the self-discovery of that happening, and like seeing that, watching this thread is just another succinct like episode in the wild of people being like, I guess I don't want to use SPDX anymore. I guess Cyclone DX is the better format in certain ways. And we're like, yeah, I mean, they're going really aggressive on targeting how to identify vulnerabilities and use Vex documents again. They're just enhancing the vulnerability description side. So it's a natural kind of conclusion that that's what you move to if you're doing vulnerability scanning.
Right, and PS, Cyclone DX has an evidence field, so the locations is like, there is a perfect spot for it there anyway.
I can't tell you how many issues I wish actually resolved in this way, where it's like, oh, I'll just switch to this format. It's done.
All right, but I do think we should enhance the SPDX, so in that way. So like I said, I'll definitely keep this open for that purpose.
Do we fill out the evidence field in Cyclone?
I think we may not be doing that, but I noticed that we do have, we need to fix that, another thing, but I don't think so.
Right, should we pick the next one? I went with Syft 3955. 3955. Where is the chat? It keeps disappearing. There it is. Bop. There you go. Overriding skipping OS detection. Did anyone? Oh, okay. Will, you tagged this as needing discussion.
Yeah, I think can you scroll down a little bit? I don't remember. Oh, I see. The reason I added needs discussion is because this person had an idea that would change things, but I think that would like make a breaking change to an interface. But I think what I wanted to discuss is like, I think we can't accept a breaking change to the interface, but if it's worth having a config that turns off attempts to check what distro you're in, and if so, what does it look like? Is it like part of the catalogers API? Is it its own weird top level Boolean? I'm not sure why. I might, while you'll discuss that, I might have a look at this person's port, because I don't understand why this would change
Every
an
single-
interface.
Every single cataloger has been updated. The signature has been updated to be, instead of package cataloger, it's now called package cataloger with release, which is that's one way to do that.
Are they trying to override the are they trying to I get, maybe they're trying to override it, or I don't know.
Well, this actually touches on an architectural issue that was deferred in the Syft 1.0 work. I'll highlight, there is another oddity that occurs that I kind of want for us to like stop doing. So we have, so whenever we're invoking catalogers, those all get wrapped into a task. So, and all those tasks get coordinated together into either groups of tasks or groups of tasks and executed. One of the first ones that runs is this environment task. That's the one that he's talking about. It's the one that goes to etcls release and says, oh, what OS am I? What Linux distro am I? The problem is that information is not conveyed downstream into catalogers that need it very well. And so we do this little trick where that kind of detection is so cheap and so easy that even though that official environment task is used for being collected into the SBOM, if there is another cataloger or something that needs that kind of information downstream, we essentially go and detect it again. We don't want to do that. We only want to detect something once and allow something access to that information. And so I think the reason why, his fork seems a little awkward is it's running into that exact problem. There's no nice way to get that environment information across that cataloger boundary without changing some interfaces or introducing something new. So I guess this kind of segues into like, hey, what can we do to make this better? And yeah, introducing this interface is one way. Another way that we've all chatted about before is to have, this is on a different topic. It's on this Syft can use a lot of memory. If we have all the catalogers are on, and say a bunch of catalogers find a ton of results, and they're, it's none of those intermediary results are being streamed to disk. So we've talked about before changing the cataloger interface to, be less functional. So instead of returning raw results, instead pass a writer object to catalogers so they can write intermediate results to that writer. And so this would be like an SBOM writer. In that same way, it could be a way to convey information from other tasks. This is a bit of we get into unknown, untalked about categories, because today catalogers are independent. They're very strictly independent. So if we start allowing for getting information from the results of other catalogers, like we have to, how we coordinate tasking gets more complicated, but it does allow for this, an answer to this problem of how do we get distro environment information from a previously run task conveyed to all catalogers without making breaking changes in the future.
Is that everything? No other input?
I have kind of a question. Sorry if this kind of goes a little backwards, but I think I have incomplete understanding of something here, which is like which catalogers actually have behavior that changes based on the detected Linux distribution right now?
Oh no, I'm gonna have to go look.
EUS detection does?
But I mean, does that actually change the catalog in the Syft cataloger? Does the RPM cataloger not look for RPMs if it detects Debian? I didn't think that was the case. I thought they.
No, yeah, I don't think so.
I'm just trying to figure out if this is like a functional ask, like the user has like a root file system and it's got, they don't want it to, they actually want to change the behavior of the SBOM result, or they are essentially saying like, I just don't want the distro section to be populated when I point Syft at a directory. Or it kind of implies from the issue that there's an assumption that it's an expensive operation they're looking to streamline, but something you said earlier, Alex, about that being really cheap, which is why it's kind of spread out, might contradict that. I'm just trying to figure out like where the sort of crux of the functional, like the change ask is coming from the user's perspective. It's not super clear to me.
Well, I can see one thing, which is, especially from this list, that they might be running a directory scan to have a targeted SBOM, but want to include Linux information, and it just doesn't show up. So augmenting the SBOM with that information seems like one. At least
yeah, you might be right. So yeah, because it says somewhere like there's a directory that just doesn't have Etsy, let's say, just for thought experiment. But they know it's a Debian 2204. And so they want to tell Syft, this is actually Debian 2204, even though I'm not giving you an Etsy directory, something like that.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I might be stepping too far back. I was just trying to wrap my head around the response, like, because I understand being able to specify a distro for Grype, because it actually really affects the result, or it can really affect the result you get back because of the data sources considered and all of that. But for Syft, I'm just trying to figure out the utility of omitting distro, but maybe that's it, Keith. Maybe it's like actually adding one because the person running it has the knowledge.
Right, that seems like the most plausible use case that I can come up with. Although, of course, in Grype, they could just specify the distro as a flag to get the right thing there if they needed to. But I mean, if they're sending these SBOMs around to people, it's definitely useful to have that information for, like, if they know it up front and the downstream user potentially doesn't.
Yeah.
And doing just a little bit of code sleuthing, the primary use of where environment gets passed to catalogers is to create Perls correctly. And so this essentially just, so a Perl has like, distro equals something at the end, which is pretty impactful. From one side, I mean, so I guess it depends who you ask. Like, if you have a full SBOM and there's a distro block at the bottom that says the answer, then, Grype and other things can use that and still get the correct answer. That being said, if you're going to like SBDX, CycloneDX, and you don't have something like that, the Perl having distro something is really important.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yep. I get it.
I think the ask makes sense. And I guess I was also saying, hey, is there a way for us to get this in that makes sense too?
Right. Yep.
Done?
Yeah, there's a bit of a how to figure out for this one, but like, I think are we all head nodding to the, yeah, this ask makes sense.
Yep. Would you say it's ready enough to stick in the ready column, even though we don't have a solution exactly yet?
I think so. Oh, well, I got one more question. Are we just thinking about adding like dash distro onto Syft as well? Are we thinking something else?
Yeah.
I keep coming back to the like top level package information, but this one is a little bit different than that even. So dash distro certainly could be as easy as anything.
Well, what's your suggestion for the top level package one? You mean like the source package kind of equivalent stuff?
Right, but but like I said, this is specifically for the OS, which is not actually even the same thing as that.
So, yep, ready. And then I could put a comment about like maybe we put on dash distro for this, and yeah, sounds good.
Next.
I've got one. It's I figured out the one I wanted to ask about. There is an open PR that I think is
This one, clean up download image from demons.
yes, that one.
Sweet.
And there's
Thank you.
there's a PR for, oh well, I think there's a PR for that. Yeah, there's a linked PR if you look at the thing. Anyway, the question that I just had for the team, this is a pretty simple one, is I think we want configurable behavior to have stereoscope either delete an image from the local Docker daemon if it pulled an image, or to leave it there. Today, the behavior is if we pull an image, then it just hangs around in the local Docker daemon and somebody has to go manually clean it up. And so this would track when we initiated a pull and then also clean it up in the daemon, which I think is a great thing. And I'm just really curious, like what people's thoughts are on what the default behavior should be. If we should change it to be this way, or if we should make people use a flag to opt into it.
We should not delete things without an opt-in, like because it breaks all the other Docker semantics, right? Like when you Docker pull your image, that image exists locally until you tell it not to. When you Docker run, the image exists locally until you tell it not to. And so I think it'd be really, really surprising to people to like they pull an image and then they scan it with Syft and then it's gone and they have to repull or whatever. So my suggested UX is that we accept --rm, just like Docker does. And that makes us clean up the image from the local Docker cache when we're done with it, just like Docker does. that would be my vote, because I think that would be least surprising for people in like the container world. But I really don't want to change the default behavior.
And I want to just to clarify, we wouldn't delete anything that we didn't initiate the pull for in Syft itself. So the only thing that would, so it would be if you run Syft, it doesn't have that image locally. It has to it has to initiate a pull. So Syft causes the pull to happen, and at the end of that that's the only scenario where it would get deleted. So it wouldn't be like randomly deleting things. It would only be if it caused a pull.
I think where those two concepts collide, though, is like if we could assert for sure that we understand the state of Docker before a pull that we initiate, and then can revert the state of Docker to exactly the same state it was at once we're done, then I think it's possible to do the auto delete without it being surprising. But I'm not convinced that that's possible with Docker because of the way that their pull semantics work with tags and digests and the interrelationship between the two, and how it promotes, something down to a none tag if you override it with a newer tag, and then you delete the first tag and it's unclear what happens the next. It doesn't go back to the other one. Like, I think there are side effects of doing a pull that are really hard to untangle. Somebody can challenge me on that, but I don't. It's not obvious to me that a pull is reversible without something else happening in between with Docker. Although I do think it's interesting. This user might actually get much more value out of using the registry source. If they don't want the image to be in Docker, their local Docker engine, when they're running Syft, then they might not know about the registry source. That doesn't even need Docker, right? And it absolutely downloads the data, scans it, and then deletes the data, which seems to be kind of what they're after here.
All right, well, I appreciate it. Sounds like we've got a relatively unanimous decision to make this opt-in. So thanks, guys.
Well, what do you think? Is that true? Like, I could be wrong about the statefulness of a Docker pull, but because like I said, I don't have that 100% for sure.
Well, I agree with it from a different perspective. So, like if I'm on a system where, that Damon shared, I've got multiple processes doing a pull. So Docker has since changed how they behave, where if you have one process doing a pull and another process decides to pull what would resolve in the exact same thing, it basically gets to listen in on that existing pull session, and they're getting telemetry of the same pull event. So it's technically possible to, have something else in the system pulling an image, say it's a few hundred megs, and then Syft is invoked to go and, analyze that. We get we start listening to that same pull event. We get the ID out, and so we can delete specifically that based off of that image ID, because we do an inspect beforehand and inspect afterwards. And I think we get that from the pool. I can't remember. But we might actually just delete it out from underneath what the other process was trying to use it for. So that's why I think if we do it, it should be opt-in. Like, they should know what's going to happen in a predictable fashion.
Also, I don't want it to ever override into a space where we didn't initiate the pull. I don't if you did Syft RM on an image and that image was already on the system, should Syft be something that can remove the image from the system after the fact, or should we just not allow it in cases where we're not the one doing the pull itself?
Right, and Docker run -rm doesn't remove the image; it removes the container, doesn't it?
Right, exactly.
And the container is just process namespaces, right? It's not really so
the mount point too.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have, so even -rm might be surprising to people. I think that makes me think that I think there are a few strong pieces of evidence that we shouldn't be doing this. One, the Docker socket is multi-tenant and concurrent. We don't know whether we initiated the pull. um, the I think we don't know whether somebody else is also pulling for that reason, and I think Dan's point that it's hard to to cleanly reverse a pull and give the person back their uh, give the person back the disk space is a really valid one. Um, so I think the way I think of it is that like when Syft is using the Docker source, Syft should be a really well-behaved client of the Docker daemon. And maybe they have some documentation or something on removing images, but I think removing by default is a non-starter because we can't be 100% sure we initiated the pull or that we're like only reversing that pull, right? Because a pull downloads a bunch of layers, but then those layers might be relevant to other people's build caches. Do we delete other layers? Like a pull is, it's not like we're just deleting one blob. Um, so, Chris?
Yeah, I plus one everything that Will said. I definitely opt in, but I also just want to really answer the question, are we behaving correctly or well by allowing Syft to do the removal? If someone opts in, like, are we going against the grain of the Docker daemon by doing this from, our client for the image pull source?
I would say probably not. I mean, in other words, I can write a shell script that's, Docker pull, Syft, Docker remove, and from Docker's perspective, it doesn't know if it was Syft or something else that was essentially doing that. So I think having this capability in Syft is, makes sense. I can see why that would make a lot of sense and help someone out that's running this continually on a system. I agree with everybody on the opt out. Sorry, it's got to flip that. It's got to be an opt-in capability. You have to say yes, I want you to delete my images. But yeah, I think this is a solid ask though. For Stereoscope and then Syft. So
Okay, so just to summarize, user has to opt in, and we only want to delete things that we initiate a pull for. Are those the two things that we were pretty much in agreement about?
Well, I guess I think if the user, I think what do we mean by removing an image? Do we mean like sending the delete command to that tag to the local Docker socket, or to whatever Docker socket we're configured to use? That's what we mean. Because I think that already says and I dropped a link to its documentation, but that already says that it's like just not going to let you delete something if it has, if there's local images built from it or if there's something using it.
Yeah, but we could force it. Well, we could be really aggressive.
That's not what we need to do. I'm just wondering if instead of doing fancy detection, it's just merely opt-in, right? If you do Syft Alpine latest --rm, all we do is send delete image tag Alpine latest to the Docker socket as we exit. And that's all we do. And Docker does whatever it does, and Docker handles the safety and stuff. Like, is that a safe implementation? It keeps us from having to detect a bunch of stuff. Because if the user's opting in and the user decides to opt into deleting images that like other people on the system wanted, that's not necessarily a Syft problem, right? Like don't opt into image deletion if you still want the image.
Well, just to be clear, we know exactly when Syft initiates a pull. Like there's a specific command in the Stereoscope path that it says go pull it. Like it checks to see if it exists, and if it doesn't, then it initiates a pull. So we don't really have too much to do to detect things, I don't think.
Right. I'm not arguing it. I'm just like it gives then we have three states, right? Not opted in, didn't pull, opted in, didn't pull, opted in, did pull. And that's more than we need. What should we do if the user opts in to remove the image, but Syft didn't initiate the pull? Do we ignore it? Do we error? Do we log a warning and not error? Like, why are we checking both?
I just
Well,
think the most useful default behavior is that somebody is going to use this flag because they're running Syft repeatedly on things, and they want to clean up the space. That's like the primary use case of this. And if they have to consciously remember to like, don't use RM for this one particular image because like somebody else is pushing it there for me, like it's a local build or whatever. And then for some other ones that I'm using, like do remember to add the RM. Like I feel like the use case is just nicer to just not delete things that we didn't cause them to get downloaded in the first place.
I +1 that one too, because I think if we didn't consider that, we're just gonna get a bug opened the next day after I release saying, "Hey, you deleted my image after I opted in for you to delete my images." And I mean, and like I feel like both sides could argue.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna get a bug either way. Somebody's either gonna say, "I passed --RM image and you didn't," and somebody else is gonna say, "I passed --RM image and you did." I think the second bug report, the person is more wrong, but maybe more likely to be in that situation. So I could go either way. I think as long as the behavior is opt in, and as long as we leave the deletion to like the actual Docker process, and all we do is like issue a command to the Docker engine or whatever, then I'm good with either. I'm a little bit worried about bugs with detecting whether we were really the ones that pulled it and stuff. So I'd rather not have it. But if people think that's the right way to go, then I'm fine with that.
Huge +1 to not trying to go around the Docker engine and delete it anyway. Like just leave it up to them, and then we report back what they said.
And we should not neglect what Dan said, which is we should tell this GitHub user that they can use the registry client, and it just won't hit the local Docker daemon, and that might just be what they want.
Yeah, I'm just passing that through from like the enterprisey side, where we've got this is a vibrant use case where, you know, we've got a lot of people running tons of create SBOM things in CI systems. And, you know, registry is often not known what it means, but is almost always the chosen source because of this, right? It's like a runner that wants to come up, get an SBOM from an image container, move on, right? And the cleanest way to do that, also in terms of, as far as I understand, like order of operations, is the registry source, because that downloads the data, scans it, and deletes it, and it has no side effects, which is really nice.
Right.
It seems like this might be what they're after, and they might just not know about that behavior of registry.
Yeah.
Well, this particular user definitely knows about it. It's in the issue, but also Mikey's been a long time Syft user, so I'd be surprised if he doesn't know.
Okay, cool. So it's possible then it has to do with credentials, right? That the host is set up with Docker credentials, and that's the only way they can get the content, which I
Yeah. But let's summarize the difference between a Docker pull and a registry pull really quick, just because we're on a live stream and it confuses people, and we just agree that people don't know about it. So when you run Syft against an image by default, if Docker is running locally, Syft will ask the local Docker engine for that image and use that, and then effectively do like a Docker save, and then analyze the resulting tar file, and then clean up the resulting tar file. On a registry client, Syft just has like the Google Container Registry client code linked into it, and we'll just download the layers from the registry directly without involving Docker, so you don't need Docker running on the system. Did I get that right? Okay, cool. So now you know.
Yeah. And one more bonus thing too is that we all the layered tars are kept in. This is more of like a call to action. If anybody's got an idea for this one, so right now we are keeping all the compressed layer tars from what is downloaded in a cache directory, and we decompress those and store them kind of also there in that temp directory. So we kind of have two copies of everything. And one easy thing is, we can just delete the compressed stuff, which is one answer. But nobody's actually done that work yet. So could be low hanging fruit for someone who wants to go and do that. Could save a little bit on that temp space, but
sweet. What's next? Anyone got one they want to pick? Who hasn't had one to discuss? Have you got one, Alex, or Chris? Have you got one?
I wasn't. I didn't do any of the triage this week, so I didn't take a huge look. Heads down.
Yeah, no worries. How about that one?
Over.
It's a feature request. Wanting a CLI option to control scan depth. $3968. We need to control scanning depth by CLI depending on our compliance use case. Ah, okay.
And it's less about like specifying a specific depth. They're saying direct versus transitive is really what they're saying. Like I want these two potential SBOMs.
Interesting. They say they want direct dependencies only for like a specific compliance view, which is interesting because I don't know. I don't know why you would be more on the hook for your direct dependencies than your transitive dependencies. I mean, I guess you chose your direct dependencies and they chose your transitive dependencies, but it's still, you still deployed it. It's still your problem. So I have a little bit of a like, the people running this compliance maybe, or I don't know. It seems strange to me not to. It seems strange to me to deliberately discard information just because of an accident of how it was installed. I'll say that, and then I'll drop that, and we can go on to discuss the actual request.
Yeah, I mean, I like this idea. From like one maybe secondary perspective is, some SBOMs are just large, and if you know your use case, and you just know that transitivs are not something that you need to fill up your SBOM with, then yeah, why not have the ability to drop it? We kind of have something similar today with files, right? We have like the default switch for including files is we describe files that are owned by packages, but you can flip the switch to like include everything. Thus, we'll grab it, digest for every file, anything we can find in every file. Or there's the other way, which is just off. And so there are users that have said they just turned it off because they're like, my SBOMs are too large. I don't necessarily care about the file information. I really am only using this for vuln scanning or with packages. So this kind of reminds me of the same thing. It's like, well, again, if they know their use case and they know they want only direct dependencies. This also reminds me of another PR that we have not gotten merged yet. I need to get back to, which is describing, do you have a full set of dependencies for any given package or not? So here, that would kind of be tied to this, where we would, if you were looking at an SBOM, and you wanted to know if does this represent only the direct dependencies or transitive dependencies, like putting a property on each package that says, like, yes, I have the full transitive dependencies for this package, or no, I do not. So awesome. Be able to at least detect that.
I did link the PR in my comment here, I think, to the one you're talking about, but yeah, definitely a related feature.
Can we, maybe it's the user's misunderstanding. Can we also just use this time to discuss what they might mean by full? Because are they just confusing the full transitive view with full, or is that if they get transitive dependencies, do they think that there's one step further that they could get even more information than that?
I had the same question initially, but they mention excluding like system packages and like standard libraries and stuff. Uh, and so maybe they mean like you have a Node app in Alpine and you just if with full you get like all the APKs, you get like whatever libc is in there. With transitive, you get all the npm packages, and with direct, you only get npm packages that you installed. Maybe I'm
We also, I think that you're close on that, Will, because we also have issues in Syft where we talk about trying to identify dependencies only for a certain layer. Like, let's say I have my base image, I have everything that gets installed and added after that, and then I have the final layer, which is add baster over into my like app folder. And I only want to know about the analysis of the SBOM for that last layer. Then maybe that is a slice that they're looking for. That's like a more narrow view than just like.
yeah, I wonder. My first thought when I saw this was that like they should be scanning a source code repository. Like if they only want an SBOM of their application, then like scanning a source repository might make more sense than scanning a production image, because the production image is going to have like, depending on their base image, might have weird user space like Perl utility scripts and stuff in it that aren't really part of anything. So
Maybe the full, their last bullet point in what we're looking at here is exclusion of certain scopes. Maybe like the test dependencies or dev dependencies, that type of thing, which I think we should probably do by default for some things, maybe. Or definitely like have an opt-in if that's the only way. But I think a lot of people, if you're trying to make an SBOM for your application and you point it at your source code, get a bunch of stuff in there that's not pertinent because we're including all of those things by default.
Right.
But maybe that's what he means by the full. It's like, hey, there's some stuff that shouldn't really be included by default, but like maybe I want to get everything I can get, like build chain and build pipeline information.
yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I had a different interpretation of what they meant here. So like here, I'm saying direct means like the things that I'm only including in my project. I'm taking transit to mean like purely indirect. It is not direct dependencies. It is everything else. And where full is just a combination of the two. Like I have my direct dependencies and I have anything that was purely transitively included. Was there another interpretation? I think I might have missed something.
That's interesting that you just include transitive and you just totally like do a mask on direct for that view. I didn't get that at all. I thought it's just like a stepwise, like including more and more as it goes down.
Yeah, I might need to go back to open up a math textbook for like, transitivity on sets to see what the textbook answer
No,
is.
it's kind of, I mean, it's like transitive dependencies without direct listed in the view is kind of like, I don't work in compliance. I don't know how useful or not useful that would be, but like, I haven't even considered that as like a view of what someone would want to see for the analysis of this.
Yeah, I think maybe we don't know.
It might more be just having them as distinct categories rather than only having one or the other.
Right.
That I understand, but when I read this, for what it's worth, it all makes sense if I look at, the perspective, at least. If I look at it as I have some software and, in my mind, it explodes into like a big collection of trees. And the trees are things where the root node is some application, they have direct dependencies and transitive underneath. But they're in a container, for example, or maybe even a file system, there's more than one tree, right? And so the part of this that I feel like is kind of missing is like, you have to be able to specify what the root is, I think, in order for this whole thing to make sense. Otherwise, you've got many trees and the notion of direct or indirect doesn't apply if you have multiple roots. Like, SH Alpine container, is that a dependency of the Alpine container. I mean, it's not going to be a dependency of your node application, but what is it? Is it direct, indirect? It's neither. It's its own application. So this thing has many applications in it, each with their own direct and indirect dependencies. And then there's crosstalk between the trees, right? So I'm just trying to figure out, like, from this perspective, if it were limited to what you were saying earlier, Will, about like, if you point this at a source code repository, you know the root, right? It's that's it. That's the source code repo is the root. Now you have all of this makes sense. But in other contexts, it's a little bit more ambiguous to me without specifying things. You know,
Yeah,
these-
I feel like to like disambiguate their use. So say that, you know, for Will, you're saying like, don't you really want to point it at a source repo? Another way, because, you know, I think a counter argument to that is, well, but I want to know what I actually have after I bake the image. And I think a good like in between is, well, still point it at the artifact, but you select down to a subset of catalogers that you want. Like, oh, I know I don't want RPMs. I know I don't want devs. You know, I just want node. So I'll just do like dash catalogers JavaScript. And so now I'm only going to get the tree, you know, dependency trees for JavaScript stuff. And so that's like the one scalpel. And then the other scalpel tree would be what's proposed for like dependency depth here, like direct, transitive, etc.
Yeah.
Are we happy with that?
Actually, I do want to say, I think I'm a -1 for anything for like the Syft Java max parent recursive depth stuff. I mean, I don't know if that was really going to come into play here, but I feel like I actually want to remove that, that option. But like, I think it actually confuses folks more than it helps folks. But
Yeah.
it's useful whenever you have something that's like, you know, if it's like diving too deep, so to speak. But it's less about trying to, it's less about dependency trees and more about just like not infinitely recursing into archives for performance reasons.
The good news, well, I guess there's that. There's also the parent and Maven resolution. So like, there's a bunch of different things like, but the Maven stuff is like disabled by default anyway. So because it like appropriately handles cycles.
Well, yeah, I feel like we had a lot of questions for this absent person during this. I wonder if the resolution is like asking them questions or maybe inviting them to community meeting or something. And I don't know, it sounded like Alex had a clearer sense of what to build, but no, I felt like I wanted to hear them say a couple things during this discussion.
Same. But I also liked what Dan's clarification of like these, like selecting like categories is because I think we could probably dream up more categories here, but this is where I would be nice to talk with the user to understand use cases. So
yeah, and Dan's point that there's more than one like root, like depending on what you think of as your entry point, like there's more than one tree of dependencies in a given image or application or whatever, and so we don't know what to subset down to, like what transitive from what. That's a really good point too. So maybe the response is like a question and then pointing out different catalogers, switching on and off, and see what they say.
Who's taking that one? Or do we need to invite them along and have a chat with them?
It's fine. I can ask some more questions just to try to get the absolute clarification. That sounded like we still had a little bit of fuzziness here. So
this might be one. I mean, the just on that front, Keith, like the issue starts with we're doing this for Docker images, jars, and file systems. Just 3 examples, but that kind of like covers the gamut. So this might be an example of, hey, like maybe we should choose a simple container image and actually like write down what you'd expect to see. Same for jar, same for a file system, because I think that would be really illustrative, like to say like for a container image, like a real one, you know, empirical example might actually surface some sort of insights.
Okay, yep, I'll
Just
see
an
if they have some examples too. It's a good idea.
Sweet, and well done. We've hit the nail on the head and wrapped up just about on time. Well done, everyone. Gosh, that was a lot of deep conversation there, and I felt I had nothing to contribute. So thank you, everyone. I'm glad you're all here. Right, we'll see you all again next Thursday for more of the same. Have a great weekend, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Ta-da!
Cheers.
Bye.